video so many times. My name is Faith Yen. I have a religious first name and a Korean middle name because I was born and raised in one of the most famous cults in American history, the Unification Church, founded by Reverend Dr. Sun Myung Moon. So today I'm going to tell you what it was like being raised in a cult a little bit, what it was like escaping. If you're easily flustered and disturbed, just don't. Toodles. I also need to let you know that I have a resting bitch face. I always speak in a monotone voice. I always look like I'm mad, and if I insult you, that means I like you. Simon Cowell is my spirit animal. Aubrey Plaza is #goals. These are all questions that I get all the time in real life, but I also mixed in some questions that I found in another video about ex-cult members, and then I took to Twitter and Instagram to ask which questions y'all thought were the most interesting. If you think of any more questions that I should answer, please leave them in the comments below, and then follow me on Twitter and Instagram so that I can burp in your face and send you really dumb memes. Thanks. Question number 1, why in God's name did I put on a full face of makeup when it's 95 degrees out and I knew I was gonna sweat it off in 2 minutes? The answer to that is force of habit and poor planning, really. Ready and go. Question number 1, how did you escape? I was never held at gunpoint by anybody. I was never physically locked in a building, but I was definitely mentally enslaved. I fully believed that if I tried to leave, I would be abandoning my family and thousands of people, that I would be humiliating God, and that God would punish me by giving me cancer. For me, escaping wasn't even a matter of being allowed to leave a house. Like, I was allowed to go anywhere I wanted, technically. Leaving was a slow and messy divorce. It was a lot like allowing myself to become a flat earther. Like, I was raised from birth to believe that all of you are as crazy as flat earthers, and that people who follow Reverend Moon are the only people who've got it right. In a nutshell, there was a period of time where I was physically separated from my cult community, finally. I was like surrounded by outsider coworkers who genuinely wanted to get to know me and be my friend, so they started questioning everything I believed very respectfully without shaming me or trying to get me to change at all. That was right around the time Reverend Moon died, and a whole bunch of scandals about his family started hitting the internet. I moved back to the West Coast and was physically dependent on my church community and trying to maintain relationships with my family. So there was a period of time where I was physically out but mentally in. A couple years where I was physically in but mentally on my way out. It's been 1 year since I've been completely physically and mentally separated from that community, and I no longer depend on cult members for anything. My friend Hannah on Instagram had a really excellent follow-up question to this. Hannah wants to know, what was the trigger for you personally that enabled you to say no for the first time? You can say no as a Moonie. You can argue, you can debate, you can ask questions. If you get really upset, you can even like skip a few events and like take a step back. It was a lot like being in an abusive relationship. So you were isolated and told that Moonies are the only people who are ever going to understand you. So you could argue as much as you want, but you inevitably came crawling back and cooperated. So I flew to New York at 18 after doing like a year of service on a church compound, and they were super excited to have me assisting in the education department. I was going to work with the head of the education department. I was going to be in meetings with members of the Moon family. And then all of a sudden, like within the week, after I'd already made all these arrangements and moved all my stuff and started a brand new life, I was unceremoniously fired, like for no apparent reason. And because housing was included in that job, I was suddenly about to be homeless as well. So I just made the most of my situation, got the first job that I could off of Craigslist, and ended up joining a sales company. It was the first time I sort of realized, hey, like there are people who care about me and don't just care about the doctrine that I'm following or not following. Like, it was really that group of salespeople, some of whom I'm still friends with to this day, who were like, you can actually say yes to more things, Faith. Like, you can have a beer and still be a good person and not immediately turn into an alcoholic. Like, you can live a little. Like, what a concept. Yeah, being between a rock and a hard place and having to make friends with outsiders and learning to say yes to more things was actually what triggered my own personal transformation, I guess, is the answer to the essence of that question. Another friend of mine on Instagram named Jess had a really great question. Jess wants to know, how does the group react when people leave? Did leadership lie? Did they pretend it never happened? I can only speak for communities I've lived in on the West Coast and the East Coast of the US. In small communities, the response was pretty universal. It was just everybody kind of just understood, like, oh, okay, so they couldn't hack it. They're just not cool enough to hang with us. Like, I guess they just couldn't take the pressure of being a soldier for God, like that type of thing. In larger communities, it was a bit different, simply because in larger communities like in New York and Boston and LA, the Moon family and different cronies on the higher level of the bureaucracy, they owned mansions in those cities. There definitely was a difference between leadership and regular members, and everybody had to drop everything and just make sure that those leadership figures were being treated like royalty. So honestly, it was easier to get away with stuff without being kicked out in larger communities. People just didn't have the energy to care so much if you were breaking rules here and there. They just needed to make sure that Reverend Moon and his family were being treated like rock stars. Sometimes in the Moonie ecosystem would leave also. Like, higher level members would leave, or in the case of some of Reverend Moon's own children, they would decide for personal reasons to not be alive anymore. In those cases, leadership absolutely would lie, and I remember being told that one of Reverend Moon's sons had been possessed by evil spirits, and that's where he got the goofy idea to just waltz off the side of his apartment balcony. So keep saying your prayers, kids, or those demons will get you. Mental health care, who is she? I don't know her. I can feel my anxiety going up the more questions I answer about this. You're free now. You're a free woman. No one is hunting you. I wish a bitch would. Number 4, how did you join? I was born. That was my first and biggest mistake. My bad, I meant to ask, how did your parents join? Here's what you need to understand. The most important aspect of being a Moonie is you don't get to choose your spouse. So my dad was running from the cops. He was from St. John's in Portland, and he had been kicked out of college for selling drugs and was committing fraud and was running from the cops on his motorcycle down the 101 when he was recruited on one of the biggest compounds at the time in the 70s outside the Bay Area. My mom is from Melbourne. I've noticed that whenever I bring up the fact that my mom is Australian, I say mom, and in every other situation, she's my mom, because I'm bilingual like that. She actually dropped out of a pretty good university called RMIT when she was approached by a Moonie lady from England. And my mom, my mom was actually one of the first full-time Australian church members, period. Both my parents did not know the other existed, and they were fundraising and witnessing and protesting communism for the Unification Church for like 7 years, 10 years. Reverend Moon in the 70s used to marry everybody himself. He would have these like basically speed dating events where, in my parents' case, you showed up at the New Yorker hotel and Reverend Moon for hours would just like grab people and be like, okay, next, you and you. They were in a mass wedding at Madison Square Garden with like 36,000 other people. And actually, they really didn't want kids for a long time. My mom told me at one point that she was going to donate me to the internal adoption network that Moonies have. I would have been a given child. Moonies believe that the second generation, like myself, blessed children. They tell us that our blood is different from everybody else's, so therefore you can't have blood transfusions, you can't be an organ donor, and you can't, if you're a Moonie couple, you can't adopt a non-Moonie kid. So they had this whole Moonies have this whole adoption network where they trade babies, like literally. And my mom wanted to do that, but my dad was like, no. So I grew up with them in Portland, Oregon, obviously. The Portland that matters. Question number 5. Did you know you were in a cult? Yes, but also no. Let me explain. I remember one day I walked into AP US history class at my high school, and we opened the book and there was a picture of Reverend Moon's face. And literally our textbook in my high school used my church as the definition of what a cult is. However, from birth, I had been coached to believe that the word cult doesn't mean what you think it means. Most people today have all of these emotional connotations with the word cult, and they think of Jonestown, you think of murder, you think of coercion and brainwashing. When I hear or heard the word cult, I was thinking, well, Christianity was called a cult before it was popular, so thank you. That's a compliment. One day, you're all gonna see, and you're only calling us a cult because you hate us, because you ain't us. What do the Moonies believe? What are they famous for? Moonies became famous in America and earned the nickname Moonies from American journalists when they started doing mass weddings. Just the huge wedding ceremonies between thousands of people really caught headlines. But also before that, in addition to that, Moonies are known for their streamlined indoctrination process. Like, they've really got the whole recruiting funnel, locking you in, changing your identity down to a science. And actually, the self-proclaimed leading expert on cults in the United States is this other ex-cult member named Stephen Hassan. He literally wrote the book on brainwashing because of his traumatic experience joining and escaping the Moonies. Most cults, like Jonestown, like I mentioned, they're famous because of the atrocities that they committed against their members, right? Like convincing people to kill themselves. But the Moonies specifically are famous because they used some type of, I'm pretending I don't know exactly what it is, like I wasn't trained to do this to people. They used some type of voodoo to convince hippies in the 70s to drop everything and become celibate and sober and fundraise until 3 a.m, selling strangers peanut brittle and wind chimes. I know how he did that, and I can explain it to you, just not in this video. That's for another time. Number 11, are you a better person because of what you've been through? A better person. This is the type of question you ask somebody who had a normal, quote unquote, normal life, joined a weird group for a few years, and then went back to normality, right? Are you a better person because of this weird blip, this small fraction or large fraction of your life? How does the outside world taste to you now? Here's the thing though, I was literally bred by Reverend Moon. I would not exist if this movement hadn't happened. I feel like a loose end from a half-baked spiritual Ponzi scheme that doesn't exist anymore. So like, when I think of what happened to me and whether I'm better after that thing, I'm thinking of how horrifying it was to realize my whole life was a lie, basically. I'm thinking about the panic attack that I had when I realized how different my life could have been if I just trusted outsiders earlier or had been given even just a little bit more information than I had. I really had a Neo from the Matrix, throw up in my mouth, panic attack for 3 days that sent me to the hospital type breakthrough when I understood like how much better my life could have been if I had been surrounded by people who cared about me for me instead of caring about whether I gave my money to Korean Jesus. Refusing to accept disrespect in my life anymore and pursuing the quality of life that I want regardless of who I have to say goodbye to, that experience has shown me more of who I am. And for the sake of my sanity and my own survival, I've had to get really, really good at letting go of things that don't serve me anymore. I guess I'm better because I'm more of myself and less of a cult, I guess. Less of a bunch of stuff that I didn't agree to be in the first place. It is very hot. It's only getting hotter, and people are fascinated by me making a video. Leave me alone. I'm sitting at a table talking to myself. Can I just be a weirdo and talk to myself in peace? Like, Jesus. Last question. What do you believe now? Girl, that is such a broad question. How do you even answer that? Okay, so since we're talking about religion, let's assume that you're asking, do I believe in God? Do I believe in organized religion? Period. I had to learn very early on in my recovery that rebellion is not freedom. It's very tempting to want to swing the opposite direction after you've been abused for decades by a spiritual community, right? It's easy to be like, you know, fuck you, fuck God, fuck religion, fuck all of that. I'm an atheist. I hate religion, blah, blah, blah. But really, when you do that just to get back at the community that hurt you, you're not thinking for yourself. You're still being owned by that community. Like your every waking moment is still revolving around your pain and your trauma. It's just that instead of doing what they tell you to do, you're doing the opposite. You see what I'm saying? The healthiest thing for me is to not forget everything I've been through, but just acknowledge that my trauma doesn't have to define who I am. I'm not going to hate God or love God based on the religions that are out there and what they've done to people. My relationship with, you know, the spiritual world, string theory, quantum theory, that's my business, and I get to decide what that means. That's pretty much all the questions I'm going to answer today. Thanks for watching this far. Thanks for putting up with my new bishness when it comes to making videos, and I'll see you around. Bye. Toodles. Ow now, brown cow. Ow now, brown cow. Ow now, brown cow. There's too many bubbles in this kombucha. Simon Cowell is my spirit animal. Aubrey Plaza is #goals. Okay, that's the energy I'm coming at you with. It's not you, it's me. Relax.